Let's talk to our party panel about it. We've got conservative strategist, Z-Lab's vice president, the one and only Chris Barron, hockey lover. We've got Democrat strategist, radio host, and Fox News contributor holding it down there on the West Coast, Leslie Marshall, and co-founder of Based Politics. She's sassy, she's classy, she is Hannah Cox. Everybody, welcome. Great to have you back after the holiday and the extended break. So, Chris Barron, I will start with you. A lot of Democrats at this point, they don't want him to run. We're tired of his exhaustion. So what exactly is he mulling?
I mean, look, this is the silver lining in the failure of the red wave to actually occur on Election Day in November, is that it makes it increasingly more likely that Joe Biden will run for re-election in 2024, no matter how much the people in his party don't actually want him to run for re-election. And the most hilarious thing is that despite how unbelievably thin the Democratic bench is, and let's be honest, it's an incredibly thin bench, almost anybody from that bench would fare better in 2024 than Joe Biden. Joe Biden is by far the easiest to beat candidate the Democrats could possibly run, and conventional wisdom, even among Democrats prior to November's elections, were that he wouldn't run for re-election. I say, run, Joe, run. Come on, buddy, we need you.
Leslie, is that what Republicans really want? I mean, I'll tell you, as an unaffiliated independent voter, this is what I don't want, Leslie. I don't want a rematch of 2020. I think that would be the worst case scenario, not only for both parties, but for all Americans. Your thoughts, dear?
Well, Joe Biden is president, and I think everybody, any president, is entitled to run for a second term. But wait, you just said you don't want a repeat of 2020. But on the Republican side, they're dealing with the same thing. They have a majority of people saying they don't want Trump to run, but in the Republicans, more than half secretly, they don't have the guts, at least, like Democrats, to say, hey, we're not so in favor of it. But at the same time, they'll rally around him on the right, just as Democrats will rally around and should President Biden on the left. And two other things. I heard this exact same thing before he ran the first time around and he won. And I heard similar stuff prior to the midterms. He's dragging the party down. He's killing us. And there wasn't a red wave. As a matter of fact, in some places like Massachusetts or Michigan or Minnesota, there were blue waves.
There certainly were glimmers of hope. You still lost the House, not by nearly as much as Democrats had feared, but we're still going to have divided government blissfully, and that is a wonderful thing. So, Hannah, I still think, and I'm curious to see how you feel about this, I still want some sort of a psych and competency test for anyone who seeks the highest office and anyone who could be in contention for the vice presidency. I want to know what we're working with before we are forced to, as some people see it, vote for awful and horrific.
Listen, Kennedy, I'm fine with the psych evaluation, but given the state of our politics, I think it might exempt most of the people currently in D.C., so I'm not sure how well it would go over. What I really want to see, though, is age limits for running for president or for any office. We have age limits on the other end, right? You cannot run for president or for Congress until you're a certain age, and that's a good thing because people's brains are still developing, and we want to make sure that people have all of their mental capacity when they get there, when they're making very important decisions that impact everybody's lives. The same thing is true on the other end, and I'm so tired of people saying it's ageist to say this. It's not. You start to lose some mental acuity as you age. That is very apparent with Biden. It's also apparent with Trump. And I think at the end of the day, when you've got people this old that are still in office, they are not in tune with what's going on the ground. They don't have the same incentives to make good decisions because they're not going to have to live with the consequences of their bad decisions. We need people our age running the show and actually get some new blood up in there. And I think that it's out of question that people should not have to go between Trump and Biden yet again. We need better options. This country surely has better to offer.
I mean, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I don't think we need people your age. I think we need Gen Xers, people who've been sandwiched in between generations and have had to work very, very hard to come up with good solutions against gummers and narcissists. Panel, don't go anywhere. House Republicans promising COVID investigations now that they have the majority. Good. Fauci says he's happy to oblige. So will the truth finally come out? Will we see some accountability? The party panel is back. Chris Barron, Leslie Marshall, and Hannah Cox. Hannah, I will start with you because I think it's pretty audacious for Fauci to be rewriting history once again on his way out the door.
Yeah, the limit does not exist for this man's audacity. I am just so done with him. This man not only funded the torturous animal experimentation that we now know led to the lab leak in Wuhan that caused the global pandemic. He lied about it. He tried to threaten people who talked about it. He tried to have us labeled as conspiracy theorists. He tried to work with the government to shut down people who posted about that on social media. And he would still be lying about it had it not been for the White Coat Waste Project coming in, filing FOIAs, and finding out what the government was actually doing. He's still working to block even more information on what he's doing as far as those practices go. I'm so done with him. We know that if he had gotten his way, we would be looking a lot like China right now with ridiculous lockdowns, skyrocketing deaths, and basic civil liberties completely trampled in this country. I think he is a menace to society, and I want him off my TV forever. I want him in jail. So I hope House Republicans follow through and get to the bottom of this, and I want to see some real accountability and a real reckoning over the origins of this disease.
Well, you know, Leslie, to Hannah's point, people are still very upset about this. And you know, as a parent, kids experience learning loss that they have not figured out a way to overcome, regardless of how much money was infused into schools. So why should Fauci get a pass?
Well, I don't think Fauci is getting a pass, although, Hannah, don't hold your breath, because he's not going to be wearing an orange suit anytime soon. Even the players that I'd like to see on the right aren't going to be wearing an orange suit anytime soon. We know that most of these hearings are political theater for re-election for most politicians, and that's on both sides of the aisle. Look, I will agree with something he said. I don't think calling it the China virus was wise from the former president, because we didn't need to get China more upset. What we needed is to be able to have investigations, real investigations, we and our allies throughout the world in that lab, so we can find out not just really where it came from, but how it came about that way, because then perhaps we would have a better time containing the various mutations that we're living with now going forward. And right now it's manageable,
you say
but
that
who knows
because
what happens around the corner.
And you know, the former president's inartful language was certainly annoying. So China could have gone in another direction, and they could have had open books and shared data with the World Health Organization, which they didn't. They turned into a completely opaque state. They jailed doctors, the ones who tried to blow the whistle on the whole thing. Some of them died from the virus itself that they were trying to contain, and they destroyed research and information. So we will never get to the cause of it. They didn't do that because President Trump called it the China virus. They did it because they were guilty, and they think that they are above scrutiny. They are not. Fauci is not. So what happens now, Chris?
Well, first off, Trump called it the China virus because, surprise, it was the China virus. And secondly, no amount of kissing a dictator's ass is going to make China step up and say, oh, yeah, hey, by the way, we killed millions of people worldwide. We screwed up. Oops, that's not going to happen. And in terms of people who aren't going to say, oops, they got it wrong, Fauci was literally wrong about everything. He was wrong about the source of the virus. He was wrong about masks. He was wrong about vaccines, social distancing, lockdowns.
I think Chris froze a little bit because he was so excited. And there's little Tony Fauci sitting there with Deborah Birx. Of course, you don't hear anything from Deborah Birx anymore because she was scapegoated. They just shoved her into some sort of bat cave and slammed it shut, and we never got to hear from her again. Maybe she was the Cassandra in this whole thing. Well, let's switch gears a little bit. The New York Times joining major global news outlets today in an open letter asking the U.S. government to drop charges against Julian Assange. Very interesting. It has been 12 years since the WikiLeaks founder was arrested for publishing classified information. Today, the news outlets that helped him do it, well, they're writing, quotes, "This indictment sets a dangerous precedent and threatens to undermine America's First Amendment and the freedom of the press. Holding governments accountable is part of the core mission of a free press in a democracy." So is the government finally ready to give up the grudge? I think they should. Hannah, where do you stand on this?
Well, they absolutely should. And I guess, you know, freaking finally, better late than never to see the mainstream media finally coming to Assange's defense. But many of us have been speaking out about this the entire time. This is a real litmus test for free speech and freedom of the press. Julian Assange has been persecuted not only by our government, but by governments across the world. This is a very, very serious thing. And you would think that journalists and other people working in the media would be equally concerned about the treatment of this man who did nothing except tell the American people what their own government was doing with their tax dollars. He let us know about war crimes we were committing. He made it possible for people to actually participate in a meaningful way in their country, which is why you need a free press. You cannot have a free society without one. And so everybody should be up in arms over his treatment. He is a political prisoner. He needs to be freed. Biden, I don't believe, will actually pardon him. He's been very aggressive to whistleblowers, including Edward Snowden, as well as Julian Assange. So I don't have a ton of hope there. But we need to see people really up in arms about these kinds of things, because these men are heroes. They deserve to be treated as such. And we need to make a strong stand for our First Amendment right now.
Absolutely right. And for freedom. Leslie?
I wouldn't agree. I agree freedom. I agree freedom of the press. But I find it interesting that these exact 5 outlets that are asking and calling for his release now were the same 5 outlets that were applauding his arrest because he put numerous people's lives throughout the world. And it was extremely expensive.
Like who,
and
Leslie?
Extremely
Because
dangerous.
and even Chelsea Manning has shown that has been said, that has never been proven, and the U.S. government was given opportunity to prove those statements in a court of law. They did not.
We have a responsibility as members of the media and members of the press to report the truth, but we also have a responsibility not only to not out people, but not to let our enemies know our hand. And I think Julian Assange is dangerous in that regard. He also has charges against him for hacking, not just for this.
All right. Well, Chris, you get to break the tie. Well, where do you stand? Are you in the irrational camp or the one that is rational and loves freedom?
Oh, come on.
I love freedom, and I think Trump should have pardoned Assange. I do think it's hilarious that the New York Times is talking about freedom of speech and how important it is. These are the people who regularly spread disinformation when it's politically advantageous for them, and regularly buried information like the Hunter Biden laptop when it's politically disadvantageous to share it. So frankly, while I believe Assange should be freed, I really don't want to hear from the New York Times on this.
Well, it's better to be right at some point than to be wrong about everything. And to their credit, they have done good work. They were the ones who broke the story on the Hillary server. And, even though the failing New York Times gets it wrong, maybe most of the time, there have been some instances where they have, in fact, been beacons. So how do you see this thing resolving, Hannah?
Well, I don't know that it'll be resolved. The New York Times does great investigative research. I often use their data. I always see the problem with the New York Times is they don't know how to read their own data, and so they'll give you the complete wrong spin on it. But I think that, they can have value. They can provide us with information we wouldn't be able to get. Look, they have amazing resources, right? They have tons of reporters. They have millions of dollars. They're able to go places you and I have no ability to go. So I wish they would get it together. I don't think it's wrong at all to call them out for disinformation or even pushing censorship of views that they dislike, but I also can't totally discount them. I'm a subscriber. I listen to them every morning. I think they're still a valuable news outlet.
So who decides what is news and who is a publisher, Leslie? Because that is one of the key issues here.
Me? No, I'm just joking. Actually, I don't know. I mean, each outlet, whether you're a television news outlet or you're a print news outlet like the New York Times, you have to have the chief, right? You have to have the editor-in-chief who makes that call. And it's not an easy call because you want your readers, your listeners, your viewers to be informed, but you also, as an American, don't want to put anybody in harm's way and don't want to give the world, American secrets. But one last thing regarding Assange, Democrat or Republican, nobody's going to bend or bow to the will of 5 news outlets requesting this.
No, but President Obama did commute Chelsea Manning's sentence, so at least one Democrat was on the right side of this issue, at least for a moment. But many in your party, Leslie, have become anti-freedom propagandists. And, I still hold out hope that someday we will all embrace freedom in all its forms. Chris, Leslie, and Hannah, love you all. Thank you so much. Good to see you.